Good morning, viewers. Today's podcast is on the novel of Henry Fielding entitled Joseph Andrews. Before I begin the podcast, it is advisable that you keep a notebook and a pen so that you can jot down the important points relating to the topic. It is further advisable to use earplugs for listening to the podcast. The topic for today is Joseph Andrews as a comic epic in prose. So here I begin. Henry Fielding wanted Joseph Andrews to be accepted as a comic epic in prose. He believed that a comic epic in prose was quite a new genre and he was keen to explore its possibilities. He also tried to expound a well-defined theory about it. He had behind him a tradition, though not fully established or developed, which he could adopt to suit his personal needs. A work might with appropriateness be styled as a prose epic if it had all the parts of an epic poem: fable, action, character, sentiment, diction, with the single exception of meter. Combining these ideas of the comic epic and the prose epic, Henry Fielding evolved a new genre, comic epic in prose. He also tells us that, like an epic, his comic epic in prose embraces dignity and solemnity of purpose. The comic epic may also be differentiated from the burlesque. Burlesque is ever the exhibition of what is monstrous, and where our delight, if we examine it, arises from the surprising absurdity, whereas the comic is strictly confined to the just imitation of nature, which to an accurate observer is sufficiently ridiculous. In the comic epic, while the characters and sentiments must always be perfectly natural, a certain burlesque drollery in style is permissible in the narrative or descriptive parts. In his comic epic, however, Fielding claims that everything is copied from the book of nature, and scarce a character or action produced which I have not taken from my own experiences. The epic writer reveals, as the ordinary historian does not, the basic truths of human nature, no matter when or where or under what condition it exists, had existed or will exist. History describes temporal and local phases of human life, while an epic reveals universal truth. The comic epic in prose chiefly promises a variety of characters involved in a very comprehensive action. The novelist's tone is light, even frivolous, and he gives a mildly satirical, ironical exposition of the ridiculous. It is epical in scale and it is comic since it is highly down-to-earth realistic. It is not history, for it is not superficial study of events, nor is it a burlesque, for a burlesque distorts while it does not. Behind the frivolous tone of the novelist, there is a strict moral responsibility which he shares with the writers of the serious epics. Having discussed Fielding's theory about a comic epic in prose, we are now in a position to discuss how far Joseph Andrews conforms to this theory. A comic epic promises a variety of characters involved in a comprehensive action on an epical scale. Joseph Andrews does take us from the countryside to London and from there back to the countryside via an odyssey of the roadside. But we do not have any comprehensive picture of life either in the countryside or in London. At both the places, the action is confined to the personal involvements of a handful of characters, with a fair sprinkling of the countryside rusticity or the genteel vices of London to give the narrative a peculiar colouring. The action along the roadside has a more comprehensive sweep. In the form of two digressions, the story of Leonora and the history of Mr. Wilson, it presents a miniature picture of the city life as well. But everything is on a small scale. In a way, it can be said that in Joseph Andrews, Fielding sketched in the outlines of his theory about the new genre which he was creating but elaborated it in Tom Jones. Joseph Andrews is a story of a man having incurred the displeasure of a lady, his superior in rank and power, tries to go home, meets with many misfortunes on the way, and at last arrives home only to find, before he is happily brought out of his difficulties, the lady and her relations trying to thwart his efforts. In numerous other ways also, Joseph Andrews tries to follow the principles of the epic structure. We can take the example of the famous battle between Joseph and Parson Adams on the one side and the hounds on the other. The battle is described in terms of broad comedy, but with the form of a serious conflict in which our sympathies are engaged. At one point, Parson Adam flees. He virtually states that he has adapted a great scene from the Iliad and from the Aeneid to the purposes of his comic epic. The interesting thing, of course, is that though it is clear enough that he has the epic formula in mind, he has so competently mastered the material that the form is but a perfect way of revealing the material, and one is scarcely aware of the formula. The interpolation of the irrelevant looking tales, like the story of Leonora, is according to the traditional epic formula. This device is common to all narratives of the time, but it also enjoys the sanction of the epic usage. These tales are used to introduce variety in the narrative. The epic writers used them as embellishments, but in Joseph Andrews, they have a thematic parallel as well and thus are not as irrelevant as they look. The really important thing for Fielding's conception of the comic prose epic is that he managed to combine modern material with the form of the Greek epic. But the study of these small details is interesting as revealing that Fielding had studied the whole problem and was consciously following the rules. Fielding takes the exposition of the ridiculous as his special field in his comic epic. In his preface, he says that the only true source of the ridiculous is affectation or pretense, and this affectation arises from one of two causes, vanity or hypocrisy. The former affects a false character in order to gain applause. The latter covers vice by pretending to its opposite, virtue. There is a good deal of vanity and hypocrisy exposed in Joseph Andrews. In fact, even Parson Adams is not free from vanity. A very interesting vanity exists in him about the great value of his sermons. At one stage in the novel, Mr. Wilson gives a long dissertation on vanity and the important part which it plays in human life. There is both hypocrisy and vanity in the character of Pamela, Parson Barnabas, Parson Trulliber, Peter Pounce, the Squire of False Promises, the Squire of Fools, Mr. Towouse, Mrs. Towouse, the surgeon, the lawyer, the justice of peace are either vain or hypocritical, and they all contribute to the comedy in Joseph Andrews. Fielding called his novel an epic also on account of the very high notions he had of the purpose of the novel. He never thought that a novel was merely a source of entertainment. He considered it a very serious form of literature, imbued with as serious a moral purpose as an epic. He felt that a novel could be a fit vehicle for profoundly influencing human thought and behavior, and used it so. Joseph Andrews does manage to be a successful attack on hypocrisy and vanity, the most common of the human foibles. As a realist attempting a comic epic, he found prose with a comic turn given to its phrase a very suitable medium for himself. Thus, in Joseph Andrews, the novelist applies all the rules of the comic epic. Thornbury points out that we are not conscious of the rules as we are in the work of the French writers of epics in the 17th century, but this arises from the fact that Fielding is a great artist. The formal principles give unity to his materials without our being aware of them. Here is the art which conceals art, but is the art of a conscious artist. So, this was the note on how Joseph Andrews is a comic epic in prose. I hope the podcast proves to be of help to each one of you. Please mention your questions and observations in the comment section below. Please do like, share and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click on the bell icon for latest update. Thank you for your valuable time. Here's wishing you a great day ahead.